Namaste. Welcome, all of you, to the fifth revelation on Gita in Times of Peril. Welcome. Good. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I've So today we're going to talk about this fifth pillar that the Gita team has come up with, and Shree will speak into it in the way that comes through him, again, revealing from the whole of becoming Krishna and the spiritual path into the rivers and the parts. And that topic is meeting darkness and holding chaos, which I think we'll all feel the deep appropriateness and resonance with in these times of peril. I myself, as often happens before these broadcasts, I found myself awake at 3:30 in the morning with a tremendous amount of energy in my third and second chakras. And interestingly enough, it had the quality of what I might call darkness. It was this teeming ball in my third chakra of intense irritability, negativity, reactivity, qualities of defeatedness. And at first, my first thought was, okay, this wasn't the state I wanted to come before 70 of my closest friends in. However, I knew I didn't have a choice, so I got up out of bed and started to sit with this energy. And it really was like a Pandora's box, just this teeming, roiling ball of energy in my third chakra. And out of it, occasionally content would bubble up in the form of a negative thought about this or that. But I was very intentional. What Satsangs had said the other day was very much in my mind about what we give our attention to. We not just empower, we actually worship. So I would bring my awareness back down to the third chakra. It felt almost like holding a squirming wild animal of energy, just going this way and that and this way and that, as it had these different flavors of negativity and so on. And by being able to hold that, I mean, the box of the Pandora's box was my consciousness. And by being able to hold that as energy in the body with not so much content and always coming back from the content right away, what began to open up was a tremendous potentiality. You could call it a power, but it really felt truer to say it's a potentiality. When that which I didn't want to be with, and I didn't want to be there. I mean, clearly this is content rising up from the asad, this part that I carry in my body. And when I could hold it, it begins to convert. I mean, this is actually the process that alchemy points to. It's a transformation in consciousness of that which is still bound and contracted and separate and small back into its unbounded, free, vast, incredibly creative potentiality. And so what I thought to do, just by way of my offering, I wanted to share my experience briefly of two things in chapters 10 and 11 that opened up for me that speak very much to this quality of how we include darkness, how we hold it, and how we actually harness the incredible latent potentiality that it carries. So the first in chapter 10 is this concept. I mean, it's not exactly hidden, but so much of chapter 10 is Krishna revealing his glories. Everything that is prominent, excellent, or splendid, whether it's the Himalayas, or Indra's elephant, or Arjuna among men, the best of men for his time. But here at the beginning, and then at the end, he also expands the field of what he is. And he says, among many qualities, intellect, knowledge, delusion, forgiveness, truth, self-restraint, tranquility, happiness, misery, birth, death, fear, and fearlessness. All these manifold conditions of being arise from me. What really struck me in reading that again and again is that misery is included. Death is included. Delusion is included. That too has its origin, its emanation in none other than divine, none other than the Lord. And then at the end, near the end of chapter 10, there's one of the most delightful phrases in the entire Gita. And it's where Krishna says, I am gambling of the dishonest. And he includes not just the moral, not just the upright, but that which is at the heart of all things. Really what he's saying is that I am the essence of everything. And often he does phrase it more positively, like I am the strength and the strong, I'm sound and ether. But there are these glimmers too that open up this possibility of including everything. I know for myself, like the power of chapter 10 is the radical power of inclusivity. And one of the ways I will experience this chapter is, it's really inspired by Shree and his revelation of chapter 10, which is brilliant. And he was sharing how in the dry period in India that he called the void, where all the magnificent experiences wilted, dried up, he would go ground with his umbrella to protect him from the sun. And he would be invoking, oh, you that create the trees in this heat. Oh, you that create this majesty. And so what I found myself doing often when I'd be out walking in Washoe is I would take chapter 10 and I would expand it. And I was doing that to get a glimmer of Krishna's state. So I would say, I am the beauty of the undulating hills that roll forever. I am the wind that caresses my bare skin. I am the splendor of this sunset and the gleam of the reflection of impossibly silver off the water. And following Krishna's lead, I wouldn't just stop there, right? I mean, it's really fun to be in the poetry. But I would also play with this concept of darkness. And this may be an ignorance, you know, Simon, and if it is, Shree can correct me. In fact, he's my safety net, right? It's like, so I get to be the trapeze artist. But I would also open it up with things that were not splendid, that were not glorious, but that too, you could say, had a prominence or an essentiality to them. You know, so I remember one of the ones that hit me strongly after listening to Satri's revelation was, I am the wildfires in California. I am the smoke that's burning my eyes and making it difficult to breathe. And from there, I would push it out. I am the shrewdness of Donald Trump's tax lawyers. And this is where I might get in trouble, and forgive me if it's an ignorance, but I wanted to push the envelope and include ignorance and darkness in all its forms. So I would say things like, I am the lust that lies in the heart of the child pornographer. And I would feel what would happen in my system when I'd say things like this. It was like this coil of my morality my innards would kind of roll over. And it's like, is that okay? Is that blasphemy? Is that ignorance? I certainly didn't mean to disrespect Krishna in saying that. But the thing is, the more I expand what Krishna is, playful, joyous, poetic, the more I get a taste of it, you know, so I can be out. I am Walmart. I am high fructose corn syrup. I am obesity. I am credit card debt. I am the fucking peril. You know, when you can include all of that, it blows you out. It blows out your conceptual framework of what God is, and it leaves you with God. I remember what hit me was in the Washoe Valley Satsang, I was speaking about this, like how blown away I was by how simultaneously terrible and splendid and magnificent Krishna is. And I said, he's the ascendancy of darkness. He's come to correct. And it just blew my system out. I just couldn't handle, like, how could that be? That God could be the very problem he comes to fix. Yeah, I'm not saying that's the ultimate truth, but I'm saying it is a truth. So one way of accessing something of a glimmer of the state Krishna is speaking to Arjuna in chapter 10 is by this I amness. I am. And it can be totally playful. I am the mustard. I am the mayonnaise. I am the malted vinegar you dip your French fries in. I am Satri's mustache. You know, you can really, if you hit it from the right angle, you kind of break out of a conceptual cage you didn't know you were in. And then in chapter 11, it's when we take these seemingly separate polarities, terror and beauty, God and evil, and we bring them together and hold them in our consciousness. The way that happened for me when I held Krishna with all his glorious capacities and simultaneously with this dark aspect. I mean, Krishna's the Dark Lord. When we can do this, the closer the opposites come to us holding them in one small space, it creates a dynamic tension. Because what we've done is we've gone from the poles that uphold reality, its duality, its binaries, you know, whether it's real, unreal, good, evil, all of these. When they come together, like when you put two of the same poles of a magnet together, they start pulsating. And what begins to open up was what began to open up in my third chakra this morning. When I took the light of my awakened consciousness and I descended into that teeming, roiling ball of negativity, self-pity, passive aggressiveness, all the ways that it wanted to manifest. When the two come together like that, when they really touch, but when they're coming closer together, there's this potentiality. In this potentiality, there's so much more energy present than when things are out here and they seem stable and in place. It creates this teeming energy in your system where you're not going to be able to sleep. The terror and the beauty, the good and the evil, the Pandava and the Kaurava, the sought and the all-sought. When they're put together like that, it's like the fabric of existence itself can begin to tear. And the potentiality that created all of this opens up. And when they truly touch, I mean, that's what Sri calls a crack in the universe. So for me, just to kind of bring this practically, I want to underscore something I said a couple of talks ago, is that the way to work with this is to move towards what we don't want to be with. It's to strengthen ourselves, to build our capacity, so that we become capable of holding the very things in time that we've structured our entire personalities around ever having to experience again. It's so paradoxical that what we long for, where it lies, is hidden where we least want to look and what we least want to experience. So for many of us, right, we're very strong in one of the two polarities. Like most of us are good spiritual people, yogis. We know the creation side. We don't so much want to experience anything like our annihilation or our non-existence. But when we do that, we're only living in half of what's available. And it's actually one of the things that's keeping us most bound. So the more we can set an intention, the more we can cultivate a willingness to move towards that in us that we can't stand outside of us. Intolerance, hatred, perversity, cruelty, injustice, unfairness. The more that we can hold that, the closer we're coming to the source of existence itself. It's in that raw, fecund, fertile, potent ground of being. I know Shree, it's in one of his revelations, might be in one of the ones on chapter 18. He says, your worst experiences, your worst experiences are your highest states. It's when you're closest to that principle. So in the context of today's conversation, darkness is something we want to move towards. It's something we want to first include and then to bring very close to us, into our bodies, into our beings, because it's in that dynamic tension that it can be redeemed, it can be transmuted, it can be alchemized back into the very essence that has created and sustained all of this creation. And that's my offering for today.
Again, I want to applaud. I mean, that's clearly a demonstration of this conversation. It was perfect. Okay. It was perfect. It was a perfect expression. And it's good to re-listen to this, because clearly this is the struggle that we all carry, is the peace of the darkness we don't know how to be with. And it's really the conversation of capacity. So how did you receive this, right? I noticed some of your children came to embrace you because they sensed you were in a process. There was this movement of disturbance that has to have an impact in the quaking of those domains where your Pandora's box lies. So the invitation, obviously, as we look here in this fifth revelation, what are the precursors? What's the preparation that makes us capable of manifesting? Where do we then become useful? This capacity building is directly proportional to our capacity to meet our own darkness, to meet it, to choose to meet it, and to empower yourself bit by bit, like getting vaccinated, so that you can be with it without getting overtaken by it, without getting thrown into its story and its convincing conversation about what's wrong with you, that you have such a thing. So when we look at this particular session, we're covering quite a bit of territory, where we have come in the Bhagavad Gita, we've come and merged with the Supreme Being in the 11th chapter, and we've met the horrible and terrifying and exciting and thrilling and ecstatic expressions of Krishna. And we said, clearly, Arjuna said, enough, I can't take it, please come back. Be that blue guy with four arms. Anyway, let me return to my ordinary consciousness, because I can't take this. Well, that was showing Arjuna the nature of what Krishna is, so that a seed could be planted, a doorway could be opened in the possibility of what Arjuna actually is, as we all are. Inherently, what is living us is the principle that Krishna represents in the Gita, the Supreme Being. Coming out of that, he goes into this relative kind of bewildered state of the 12th chapter. And he's trying to figure out what has happened to him and how's it compared to what he's known before, and what's the evidence. And then Krishna was just saying, well, when you come to the truth of yourself, you're going to have these qualities. You're going to have these divine qualities available to you. And it lists them off. And I won't go into those there. You can look them up for yourself. I think we have a handout somewhere on divine and undivine attributes, and you can check off which ones you are today. You know, when are you in your divine self? When you're in your divine self. It's useful because it helps inform your intelligence to be a collaborator with the process that you're in. And then after this relatively tranquil 12th chapter, you go into the 13th chapter. And in the 13th chapter, you begin to meet the fundamental universal matrix that organizes all of existence. And so in this chapter, which is titled The Yoga of the Field and its Knower. This is, we find that the battlefield, the whole arena that matters, that really matters, is our body and all the systems associated with it. It gives the place where Arjuna needs to be. That's the spiritual equivalent of the Kurukshetra of the first chapter. He is standing on the threshold of the real battlefield where the true manifestation occurs. This is a quality of capacity that is now available to one at this stage of the journey. When you have met those horrific moments of the darkness where your very existence is in question, either prematurely or somewhere along your journey of your life or on the spiritual path, those have been the introductions to the territory of the battlefield that happens when you become a universal being and you're no longer dealing with just the issues of your psychological nature that has been in play and the dominant, but actually greater forces are starting to work through you, both of light and darkness, which is taking those parts of your structure embodied as an individual human being and enhancing them and making them more painful or more glorious, because the very capacity of you as a perceiver and experiencer now is tapping into a current much bigger than your own individual current. And therefore the trauma and the difficulties and the challenges are of a different order. They're more intense, they're more tangible, they're more immediate. At the same time, your capacity is more capable, more present, more able to meet these. This part of you that still retreats to the less capacity gets in the way of you meeting this new capacity that, when these challenges come, evokes in you a greater power, a greater willingness, a greater openness, which we talked about, the surrender. That surrendering, that ability to go beyond the boundary of where you've gone before, is evidence of the capacity that's with you, but you don't know that yet. The person of you is still learning of what it is and what you're becoming. You're still learning that actually you can handle the peril, that you have a greater ability to be with what you couldn't be with before, not only because of its darkness and its threat and its risk, but also because in the process you discover this rising capacity within you to match it. Out of the peril comes the purpose. That purpose is a current, as we speak of, a current that lives you, that's living all of us. That current becomes even more activated when there's peril. When it's not activated, the current goes into the more common, expanded versions of the flow of the current, of the pond or the lake, and your movement. But when the force of the current increases, you're pushed out of that relative tranquil place into the next arena where you're making space for the ocean in the flow of the personality you carry in your body. Bigger forces come to work on your system. Bigger events start happening for you in your ability to perceive and to recognize what is going on. You become a different kind of being, and in the process, your body becomes a different kind of vehicle. It starts opening up. It starts expanding. It starts strengthening or becoming more resilient, becoming a resilience that is strong, not a resilience that is passive. A resilient that can meet what is coming, rather than a passive that can step aside and not be present with it. It's very tricky at this stage because you have, at this stage of the journey, a back door. You can exit, you can bypass. You don't have to go into what is arising. And you can actually stay in that state long enough that when the issues arise, you don't even have to meet them, because you're out, you've bypassed and escaped into that quality of consciousness that can withdraw its consent, that can pull back from its attachment and its investment. in the world, in how things are unfolding, or stay in a state where all this just disappears, is irrelevant. You know, as I notice every time I come out of samadhi, it's just, wow, how different this vibration is of this physical embodiment. It's just so tangibly different than all the other dimensions that I operate in, each of which are tangibly different from each other. It is clearly one frequency. And one of the capacities that's happening is this escape clause, where you really don't have to be here. But then in that way, you will not be able to manifest. You'll be not interested in manifesting. And you'll be hiding out in the territory you've created for yourself and not completing the purpose of your awakening, the purpose of your birth. So I spoke of the powers that every human being has, that comes with our self-aware consciousness. The power to hold a context, the power of setting attention, a power of taking action aligned with that attention, our individual will to withdraw our consent for that which is not aligned with our purpose, and to take actions that are aligned with our purpose. These are the developing powers, capacities of a self-aware being who's awakened. We become capable of using our consciousness as a tool for giving attention or withdrawing attention. When we come to this stage of the journey, however, these powers innate that were available in our awakening become enhanced. They actually change your whole system as you apply these powers. You become a different kind of knower and experiencer, more total, more vivid, more tangible, more real. You begin to see through the veil of the habits of you in ways that you had not seen before, and thereby have greater choices on how to be with something or not be with something. That inherent power of choice then becomes a instrument of creation, an instrument of being able to hold things in new ways, of bringing forward a new paradigm, a new intention that actually starts changing the realities of your life, the physical human life. It also changes the realities of the subtle dimensional world simultaneously. And these become more accessible to you because you're more there for them. And this power of application of consent or withdrawing consent, of support or withdrawing support, are evidence of the unfolding Supreme Being within you. So it's in the 13th chapter, verse 5:11. The Supreme Purusha that dwells in the body is called the witness, the consenter, the supporter, the enjoyer. Those are the four powers. Those are the powers, and then there's two attainments. The witness is the one that's available to us when we enter the path. We can step back, we can witness. But it's a weak power. It's not interested in changing what it's witnessing. It is not interested in getting overtaken by what it's witnessing. So it tends to stay and prefer its position as the witness. And when the witness gets obscured, then it has no power in the midst of the obscurity to come out of it. It has to wait for the cycle of Gunas before it can recover its witness state. It is still the victim of the ebbs and flows of the Maya dimension that we are bodies, and our psychology and our vital, mental, physical system is still being in the enthrallment of. The second power that comes is the consenter. So Satdas spoke of it. He found the ball. The witness in him has found the ball. He's known it before. But he found it while it's in the Pandora's lid has been lifted. He found it while it was happening. His capacity to move from witness to engagement while it's happening meant that he chose that action to meet this squirming mass of diminishment and anger and revolt and whatever may be have coming out of that. In that process, as the consenter, he is letting the darkness, he's letting the part that his consciousness has been the victim of, to show itself where he is the holder of it. Now, that's a fundamental shift. It's a fundamental shift from being the victim of it to being the authority over it. The power of the victim is just to ride the current. The power of the authority is to create a new relationship with what's arising. And in that power, he started tapping another resource that was operating through him as the Supreme Purusha, so that the little Sattas, the person that was Tom, is now of a different order, choosing to be present with the confrontation of the actual essence of the peril in terms of his psychological embodiment, the darkness that he has not been able to find a resolution with. And that gave him the ability to consent, to allow for it to show up. He didn't just do that, because that would be just like, okay, fuck, that's terrible. Now go back to where some other refuge, take a sleeping pill, or, bring out the bottle of bourbon. He chose to support it as a purposeful application of his attention. Now, that step where he chose to be with it, he's the supporter. Now, at that step, he's not the supreme being of the witness alone. He's not the supreme being of the consenter. He's the supreme being as the consenter that says yes instead of no, and staying in the process of holding that. The verse for the next step is enjoyer, but is the meeting of the quality of what it is, because in the vantage point of the Supreme, the worst experience and the best experiences are enjoyments. So the principle here is he was able to enjoy and meet, to the extent that he's now been able to communicate, something of the very essence of that state of consciousness, because he could step to the fourth step: witness, consenter, supporter, and enjoyer. What he was demonstrating when he shared that experience was the great Lord, the Supreme Being. He was bringing that capacity into language, sharing it with you all. Of course, he created the peril by creating this course from the very beginning. So the Supreme Being in him has been working on this the whole time to set him up for this. So there is no accidents in this arena of where he's stepped into, because he's been creating it all along, for just to create the right situations by which he cannot escape, that will take him across the threshold through the eye of the needle that he had never been willing to cross before. And it's a beautiful demonstration of that. So there's the territory, guys. This is not just an educational course. This is a showing, a demonstration. This is what manifestation is. It's a showing, a demonstration of what this stage of the journey is, and a test chance for you to recognize yourself in relationship with that. And I assure you, it's going to be 1 in 1,000. Now, how many of you are already 1 in 1,000? We don't know yet. We'll see. If you retreat fully and we never hear from you again, we'll know where you are. If you stay participating, but you put your toe in and you take it out, every few months or a few years, then we know where you are. And if you immerse yourself, then we know where you are. It is ultimately where the way we bring it into our lives, it's the evidence of where we are on the journey. And it's not to be defeated. You have to honor the Prakriti. You have to honor what your system can tolerate, what it can hold. Even if your awareness can grasp it, you still have to translate that into your embodiment to make it real. So this is the power of the 13th chapter, because when it's in your embodiment, you begin to accelerate that capacity that becomes more and more apparent to you you not only recognize yourself as a Supreme Lord, it is you recognize yourself as a Supreme Being. And that's where chapter 13 takes us. We leap into the last stage of the transformational process as we enter into the 14th, 15th, and 16th chapters. These are all preparation for the integration of the capacity that has come, and more opportunities for you to discover as a witness, more and more opportunities for you to give your consent to the witnessing, more and more capacity to choose to be the supporter, to let it reveal its nature, and a greater and greater capacity to be in the enjoyment of the recognition of the hidden truth. And in that process of enjoyment, discover yourself as the great Lord, the divine being, the intermediary between the unmanifest and the manifest. So the reward for doing these actions is what converts the enjoyment to being both. When you are in the process, Satya's pointed to it, where the two opposing forces of light and dark start coming closer, a huge tension starts occurring. It is, you are working in the very foundational state of consciousness out of which the creation came. Now, I got to tell you, just to give you an analogy that was in my experience that I've used before, when I was 16 years old, I was the projectionist in a movie theater. And the projectors, you had two projectors at that time, and the way you lit the light is you got two carbon arcs that were two carbon rods that you brought both fully charged, fully ready to both positive, fully ready to short out, and you brought them into a point where they just about touched each other, and you held it there, and you got it just that 16th of an inch, that eighth of an inch, and the whole thing is just arcing. Then you got the light that makes the movie seem real on the big screen. It is the capacity of consciousness takes on this huge, intense potentiality as you come into the paradox of those structures that are foundationally embedded in the very fabric of existence, in time and space and duality and cause and effect. It is the very fabric of existence. And it's very interesting. If the two arcs go together, if the two rods hit, everything stops. Nothing happens. It's just darkness. It just ends. The whole possibility is gone. There's no potentiality. It's only when they're a fraction of an inch apart that both domains exist simultaneously, existence and non-existence. I got to tell you, you learn to enjoy this, but you got to have enough darkness to feed the light. If you don't have enough darkness, then you can't keep the arc cooking. You have to have the peril in order for this principle that we're ultimately pointing to, the Supreme Being, can manifest through us. It is a matter of capacity, the ability to tolerate the process of meeting the paradox, of being in the chaos. So when this capacity, by the way, this is happening simultaneously. So it's not just like, you enter into the 13th chapter, then the 14th chapter, and then the 15th chapter, and then you're good for something. It's rather each feeds the other. So the 13th chapter begins to show you begin to meet the forces, the beings, the principles, the laws that are the current in the manifestation. You start meeting the Sat and the Chit and the Ananda. You meet the spirit and matter in its play. You begin to feel them. You begin to recognize them in a tangible way where you find the tamas, not as a human being overtaken by the obscurity, but by that eternal, unchanging, never changing, imperishable quality of this consciousness as the sought. Or meet the rajas as not just the endless movement, but as a force of manifestation, as a current of becoming. And you meet the sattva as the vast, vast, unspeakably vast realities of consciousness outside of the boundary of creation. All of these are revelations of how these moods that before shaped us and shapes all of existence, shapes the seasons, shapes the cycles, shapes the patterns of movements that occur as our solar system rotates around the center of the galaxy, as the moon rotates around itself, and the moon doesn't rotate, as it rotates around the earth, and the earth rotates around itself. These are the movements of Satchitananda. These are the movements that have allowed this world to hold enough continuity to allow for matter to become life, and for life to become mind, and for mind to become self-aware, intelligent. We are the arena in which all these are vigorously sustaining, preserving, and destroying this creation we live in the midst of. And, this is very personal, right? Because you were born, and you're aging, and you will die. So this isn't an abstraction. You're going to have your sattvic moment that becomes quickly tamas, and then you're going to have your tamas becoming rajas, and your rajas becoming sattva, and then it's going to cycle all over again. You begin to discover the gunas. You begin to discover their lower vibrations and their higher vibrations. You begin to see the cycles and experience the cycles within your own system. And you can see where your diminishment becomes stronger when you're in the tamas, and your distraction and your restlessness becomes worse when you're in rajas, and your spaciousness and your presence and your ability to know the truth of you and your purpose becomes more available when you're in sattva. And like all things that we are still ignorant to us, the more we become aware of them, the more we recognize their impact on us, the more they transmute into something else. And they're no longer the same sort of thing that when the guna comes, we are riding with the guna. Instead, what happens as our consciousness capacity grows, we are that which is noticing the guna. And the gunas are rising and falling, but we are holding the space for them as they rise and fall, either as the witness, or as the consenter, or as the supporter, or as the enjoyer, and proportional. We have a say. We have a say if we're going to go into the depression, and we're going to believe the negative story, if we're going to believe the fear, if we're going to believe the idea of going down the rabbit hole, or if we withdraw and don't believe it. And notice us going into that negative pattern that takes us down into shame, diminishment, unworthiness, incapacity, and overwhelm. It is my experience that this prepares us. When we learn how to ride with the gunas and not be so totally overtaken by the gunas, then the quality of our consciousness remains more and more stable. It becomes more and more capable of holding itself in the current of life. And it then can choose, and when it chooses, it starts meeting the darkness in ways that wasn't possible before. The nature of Krishna is the Dark Lord. It is a being who's gone through the stages of a witness, of a consenter, of a supporter and enjoyer. He is one who has gone beyond the current of the gunas. But he is not separate from the currents of the gunas. He can recognize the currents of the gunas, and he has chosen to be in the currents of the gunas, remaining in herself. To be in the midst of the immediacy of the cycle of the guna that you're in is the immediacy of now. It's the immediacy of recognizing what's happening internally and externally. the ability to be in that as a choice, not as being the victim of it. And that is what makes us, brings this creative capacity that the great Lord, that the divine being, we all carry within us, that is awakening in the process of this spiritual journey into reality, where our ego identity that gets lost in the gunas becomes something else that includes that which also doesn't get lost. That they concurrently both exist in the paradigm of your I amness that includes both your unbound and your bound qualities. This is how we begin to, in our own self, bring together the paradox and the chaos and the confusion and the uncertainty into the same frequency of our consciousness. In the process, we eat the error. In the process, it's simultaneously, we enjoy the correction. We become the solution by being with that we have not been able to choose to be with, little less recognize or see. So this process that takes us through the 13th is this arena of the modes of Prakriti, the modes of the creation. And Krishna says at the beginning of this chapter, let me now tell you, I shall again tell you the supreme knowledge which has enabled seers to attain perfection. That with the help of this knowledge, they are able to attain my nature and are not born again, even at the time of creation, nor are they distressed at the time of disillusionment, because they don't go anywhere. The state of one who's gone beyond the guna is the causal state. It is the state prior to the gunas. That means at that point you're living prior to, you are in the state of consciousness of that which is prior to the manifestation, prior to existence. Therefore, when existence arises, you're always there. You're always there. You're in every body. You're in every field. You are that principle, not that person. And you can be a person. And that is what that principle, by the way, that principle that Krishna is pointing to, this is the perfect perfection. This is where we gain the capacity and the mastery to take these greater powers and apply them in our lived life, in the field of a personality and our embodiment we haven't yet met, and use this as our Mahabharat, our great battle. Because when we do hear within ourselves, we qualify to do it for others and the world. When we have discovered this principle within us, it becomes a contagion when we speak, when we share our experience, when we even hang out with other people. It becomes a radiant quality of truth permeating, of love permeating, because they are both always concurrent. And in our field, we begin to discover what we've become. Our little ego begins to say, well, fuck, look at that. I mean, Satas is probably going to watch himself and say, who's that? Afterwards, right? Wow, he was really good. You know, is it going to catch on? The ego is going to catch on to what it's becoming, and it becomes this conscious collaborator. It becomes the egoic premise of I amness as a supreme being who is here both for the enjoyment, but also to meet the peril and to expand and support the evolutionary unfolding of this world and all that live within it. So this is the big arena. This is the fifth pillar. It is also the fifth peril too. It is stepping into the fullness of the challenge with a different set of capacities and skills. Now, there comes a time as you're transitioning from 13th, 14th, and 15th, where this comes to you. And this is where you're in the midst of the creation, both from the subtle worlds and from the material worlds. And you're standing in the midst of this imperishable matrix called the imperishable tree. And while you're standing in the midst of the matrix, there is this capacity revealing what it's become. Purushottama Yoga, 15th chapter, my absolute favorite chapter. If this is your favorite chapter, then you know your destiny. The Blessed Lord said, this eternal tree is said to be imperishable. By the way, this was, every day I read a chapter of Gita. Well, today this was the chapter, so it's perfect. This eternal tree is said to be imperishable, with its roots above and branches below, whose leaves are the hymns of the Vedas, all the sensory impressions, all the subtle domains of energy, and they're all their own zillion in diversity and complexity. One who knows the truth, those who know the hymns of the Vedas, one who knows the truth of this tree is a true knower. Then he steps onto the other side. Nurtured by the three gunas, the branches of this tree spread both below and above. Sense objects are its foliage. The roots, which also spread in both directions, bind the being with actions in this world of matter. You got to understand, even the lust, even the hatred, even the repulsion that comes from the roots that are embedded in our embodiment have another set of roots that come from above, and they intertangle so that even untruth is truth, even ignorance is knowledge, even pain is bliss. And in this web, we are born in the midst of, we're born in the middle of this entanglement of forces from above and forces from below that are trying to work out in this incredible complex diversity of this creation. And it animates every single piece of it. Every cell is animated by the same matrix that this imperishable tree is pointing to. And as long as you're caught in the matrix, you're either going to be here or you're going to be here, but it's very hard to be both. But it's only when you're capable, when the capacity has come. It is not possible to know correctly the nature of this tree in this world, neither its beginning nor its end, nor also the secret of its true existence. So don't try to know it. You can't figure this one out. The complexity and the layers of intertwinedness between what is below and what is above and what is above and what is below is too complex that any body of knowledge that is associated with our individuality could recognize. However, you can be with it, and you can notice its impact on you. And this is where, therefore, one should cut this firmly rooted, ever-changing, imperishable tree with the axe of strong dispassion. Thereafter, the goal is to be sought from where no one ever returns, taking shelter in that primal spirit from whom has come the flow of this creation. A portion of myself has become the eternal soul in this world and draws to itself the mind and five senses which rest in Prakriti. When the Lord acquires a body and also when he departs it, he goes taking them along like the wind blowing perfumes from their source, presiding over the senses of hearing, sight, touch, taste, and smell, and also the mind. This embodying being enjoys the object of senses. He's speaking of a quality of consciousness that I'm speaking of here. You discover you were always the great Lord. It was always that quality of you that was the witness, the consenter, the supporter, the enjoyer, and the great Lord. You discover a place to stand that is absolutely beyond the gunas, beyond the creation, that is right there at the source where Sat resides. You're at the doorway, just like Sat does. You're a crack in the fabric of existence. So the quality of that consciousness for me was samadhis, where I'd be gone for days, not knowing I was gone. And there was a winking out and a winking on. And there was like no difference for myself before and more myself after, except I didn't know who I was. Before I thought I knew. Afterwards, I didn't. And this would happen every few days and for 3.5 years. So after a while, I got to recognize that whatever I was becoming was of a different order of either side of what was happening. And that is what entrained in my system, this recognition of this thing we call the Sat force, the Supreme Being. That principle that is the man, that piece of us that takes a birth, that piece of us that illumines our intelligence, that piece of us that lets us experience existence, and that piece of us that travels between lives as well as in the life, the piece of us that has an ancient history of lifetimes, carrying the entire lineage of the unfolding of evolution in some fabric of our embodiment, which holds all of that as part of its design, its collaboration. We are a microism of the macroism. The imperishable tree above is also our imperishable tree that comes from our intelligence looking down and from our experiential root coming up. This lives within us. These two come together in our third chakra. Therefore, he says, I am the fire that digests the food, that converts matter into spirit. The brilliance of the sun, which illuminates the entire world, and the luster that shines in the moon and the fire are from me. Entering the earth with my cosmic energy. This is the first time Gita referenced cosmic energy. This is the Sat force. I support all beings. I nourish all the plants. I become the nectarine moon. Taking the form of fire in the body of all creatures, I join with the prana and the apana, and I digest the 4 kinds of food. I'm seated in the hearts of all beings. From me come memory and knowledge and forgetting. I'm the object of knowledge and of the Vedas. Alone, I am the author of Vedanta and the knower of the Vedas. He is in the state pointing to the integrated state, where the paradox that we inhabit, the bound and the unbound, the finite and the infinite, come together in a quality of consciousness that drives its truth from that principle that carry the potentiality for this creation. We are the embodiment. Now, in this case, at this moment, of the recognition of that. When that, you can be awake for that, because that's what happened. Why my samadhis eventually stopped is I became awake while I was in the samadhi. And pretty soon, there wasn't a difference between my waking state and my unconscious state, the samadhi state and my waking state, and they reconciled. And I became a human being. I became a complete willing human being who is in the world for one purpose, to respond to the cry of the dejected soul at that time, but it's also tapping into this purposeful current that seeks to evolve the opportunity of consciousness and matter. And that's the lead into what it means to truly be aligned with manifestation, that the principle of this current lives you. It takes you beyond what Satdas ever imagined he could do, to coming with this fervent commitment to create this program, to stick with it through all the process before and during, to come and speak as he just did at the beginning of this day. It thrust him into the domain of becoming Krishna, of becoming the principle, the great Lord, that can manifest this supreme principle. So it's not an abstraction. It was my attainment. And by the way, I see this happening in all of you. I see where you are in the unfolding of this capacity. I know that is an inherent possibility. And I know that my job, my responsibility is to empower you to recognize the role you have now during this time of peril. It's very important to recognize the nature of what you're becoming. To recognize, even if you can't feel it, even if the nature of it hasn't revealed itself to you, certainly even if you haven't realized it, maybe your awareness realizes it, but your embodiment hasn't realized it. Maybe probably for all the lifetimes you've been awake and all the lifetimes you lived as a spiritual being, you've never seen the embodiment as a critical part of the unfolding of what you had become. You may have already spent lifetimes serving mankind, manifesting from the imperishable tree above, now recognizing the real work is the imperishable tree that rises from below. The real work is the engagement in the other half of the creation, in the paradox of those two principles of light and dark, ignorance and knowledge, truth, sat and unsat. So you come here now to hear this, and you come here now because the world is crying for it. This is the cry of the world mother, and all of us ascended beings felt the call of her cry because her failure to continue to hold this world together is a danger to the evolutionary opportunity of all existence. And matter is a critical part of the opportunity of this existence. So at this point, then, the real revelation of the 15th chapter is key to be able to not only recognize the Supreme, but to recognize its lesser expressions that you all also always are. In this earthly plane, I manifest myself as two Purushas, the perishable and the imperishable. All living entities are perishable, but the unchanging soul is called the imperishable. The Supreme Being is other than these two, who as the Supreme Self is the immutable, all-pervading Lord, and upholds and maintains the three worlds. Since I am beyond the perishable and higher than the imperishable, I'm known in this world and in the Vedas as the Supreme Being. Being freed from delusion, when one knows me as the Supreme Being, he worships me with all respects with his or her own whole being. Arjuna, this most secret doctrine is taught by me. Realizing it in essence, one becomes wise and perfectly fulfills his duties in life. So the manifest and unmanifest Purushas, that's the manifest is who you are as a person, the who you are, the person you are. And the unmanifest is that quality of you, the being of you, that travels between lifetimes. That means it's unmanifest, but exists. It knows of itself both when it's unmanifest and when it's manifest. The perishable expression, the ego, is an expression of the unmanifest aspect, embodied as a person, as an ego, with a personality and all the attributes the body carry and all the cumulative lessons and errors of mankind that the body entails and holds. So the being becomes the ego. And the ego dies as we know it, because it's just an activity that is being run by the gunas, when the body drops. Although there are gunas that are working in the subtle plane, the nature of the identity with the gunas is so total in the physical embodiment that it can't see until it awakens or when it's between births. So the unmanifest being then is the one that assimilates the error and the lessons and what worked and what didn't work and carries it into the next life, hopefully to do a better job of it. But because of the imperishable tree, it doesn't have enough power. The individual Purusha, unmanifest Purusha, doesn't have enough power to change it from the consciousness that's available to it because of its embodiment. It only if they awaken. Then it awakens and something of the being's power becomes available. When the being power becomes available, then it can open to this universal principle of the Supreme Being. And it will start, universal principle will start in taking over the process of awakening the being into knowing it's something even greater than that it's been through all the eons of lifetimes. When that Supreme Lord manifests, all of those are available. It's not like you don't have an ego. It's not like you don't have a being. You have all of them. They're all there simultaneously. Now, we're halfway through. This is halfway through. Satas is sharing and my expanding on that in terms of the Gita, chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, there it is. This is the capacity building coming out of our incapacity into our greatest capacity. So now we have another conversation. We have a conversation about the dark forces, because you can't know them from within the tangle of the creation, because the dark and the light are simultaneously necessary, like day and night, sleep and waking. But when you come into this state of capacity, something else reveals. You begin to see the role you have to play. You begin to recognize the nature of the peril, of the time that you are inhabited in, the time that you are born in, the place that you are born in, the circumstances you currently find yourself. A capacity to discover the nature of the peril for all of mankind, now and for 1,000,000 generations. To discover the fundamental archetypal structures that are there inherent in the fabric of the unfolding of this creation, that are still working out through each of us, their titanic issues. We are the means by which these titanic forces are trying to come to resolution. They are trying to work out the paradox, but because they are holders of the paradox, it's not possible. They have to be something other. And that's where we begin to discover these principles that are inherent to ourselves, to the creation, to this time and place. So I have an article I wrote years ago. I don't know if I remember if I ever talked about it, because I haven't really had a course where this could be received. I have tried it in my earlier days to talk about these things, but it always closed so many doors down in people that I saw it didn't serve, that I had to back away in order to create a sufficient listening so that even this conversation could be willing to be explored. So we're entering into a conversation that some of you are capable of, some of you are getting ready to be capable of, and some of you aren't capable of. And that has to do with wherever you are in this capacity building. So if you aren't capable of, then my suggestion is don't listen to this. Go and be wherever you are, notice any turbulence that may come up, and deal with it over the next 2 or 3 days. And it will dissipate, because it'll only keep alive if you pay attention to it. And there's some of you, you're not going to be able to get rid of it. You'll listen and you'll half listen, right? You half there, half not. And then it too will start manifesting, giving you plenty of material to work with so you can enrichen what this course is pointing to. And then some of you, you're just going to be thrilled by this conversation. You're just going to love what I say. It's going to be all you want to hear. It's all you want to embrace. You want to eat it for every single meal. So we'll see. There are 3 forces at work in the creation: tamas, rajas, and sattva. These are in fact 3 principles and 3 groups of titanic beings, expressions of the Supreme Being itself. The first 2, tamas and rajas, are the demons and the asuras. These are the forces of the creation and the destruction. They are in constant battle, each striving to overcome the other. These are the most primitive forces in existence with unspeakable power. These primal beings brought this material physical dimension into existence and would have been pure chaos if it wasn't for the gods, the sattva, that provided the intermediary for the rajas and tamas. If there was only rajas and tamas, it would be destruction, creation, destruction, creation, destruction, and the opportunity of existence could not have been fulfilled. There had to be some space between those two principles in order for some kind of sustainable structure in matter, in life, in mind, in self-awareness, in order for the evolution to occur. So it was the sattva in the vibrational current. There wasn't a self-awareness. There wasn't necessarily a supreme being at the organization of this. It was totally a principle. It had not incarnated. It hadn't become a being. It was a principle also. It was in this battle between the two with this third principle that held the space for it occurring. And in the battling, the sattva became aware. The sattva became aware of its purpose. Its sattva became aware of the qualities of which were being worked out. And it noticed that as in the dimensions, as we went from matter and into organic life, it had very little power, very little say. So it had to stay in its transcendent space, not as yet a fully organized being, not self-aware yet, but purposefully holding the space of the emerging of the creation out of the inconscient, out of the absolute unknowable, where all spirit was inhabited in matter and didn't know itself as spirit, struggling to come into existence, struggling to wake up. So they are all of these. Sattva represents the gods, which came later, but they were there inherent in that quality of sattva as a principle, and the forces of rajas and tamas, which are the creative and destructive forces that preserve the gunas and the cycles and all the things that we know of this creation. This principle of sattva brought ordering and sustainability. This principle, and now I'm speaking, is that there has been some evolutionary movement before the physical matter organized, by the way, by which this principle of sattva became the gods. The subtle plane domains became established. It became each a descending order of the absolute into the finite. And each one became animated with different qualities and attributes according to the unfolding of the evolution in that prehistory, pre-creation time. And it's this that created the battling, the continuous battling went on and on and on and on and on until it's right there in the very atomic structure of matter. It's right there in everything that arose out of the organization of matter and became elements and became minerals and became the precursors of physical life and so on and so forth. So there was this development simultaneously with the roots above and branches below, with the new roots that were coming from below and coming up to meet it. The forces of the manifestation from above and the forces of manifestation from below were coming together to hold this imperishable tree. So the gunas are really very, very primal forces that have beings, have domains, have purposes unique to each one of these domains that are all here for one purpose, so that the Supreme Being can wake up as us. Period. That's the purpose. These forces are huge and powerful relative to our egoic paradigm, even the paradigm of our being. They're so much greater, but they were greater from the beginning. They were never bound. So therefore, they weren't part of the evolution, though they were here to support the evolution. Now, some of these forces that came down were dark. They were part of the sattva tainted by the tamas, or the sattva tainted by the rajas. Because the sattva fused, as all the gunas infused each other, it was the sattva in the tamas that created life. And it was the sattva created matter and also life. And it was the sattva that was in the rajas that created the current of the evolutionary purpose that expresses itself as expanding, where the tamas would come in and consolidate the growth and try to make it stable. And then the rajas would intervene and force the tamas through pain and through torture and through suffering, creating new versions from what it had been able to create before. So the rajas was always an attack on the tamas, causing the tamas to wake up out of its slumber, becoming more rajasic and therefore less tamasic. And in the process, the tamas and the rajas battling started producing more sattva proportionally. And therefore, this had created the phases of the evolutionary phases, which are defined as the 4 gunas. And these 4 gunas were periods where the evolution accelerated and then the evolution seemed to collapse, but then again accelerated to even a new possibility. So the Satya Yuga, the Treta Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga, and the Kali Yuga were the cycles of the time reflected these 3 gunas. So all of that I'm speaking of is part of this imperishable tree. The ability to recognize this and know this comes to one who is at this stage of the journey. You begin to see through the matrix. You begin to discern. You begin to cut away the part of you that still is not able to see that or to be with that. You become the means by which that imperishable tree can fulfill its purpose. You become a child. You become an embryo within this imperishable tree, this world mother principle, joining in with the Maha Shakti principle together to create a new kind of being, a new kind of intelligence, a new kind of aliveness for all of its children, for all of its creation. We begin to tap into this universal experiential knowing, and we begin to see through and see the role that the tamas and the rajas play in relationship to the sattva, that the real evolution is occurring in the battle between the tamas and the rajas. And it's these forces that together in the space of sattva can work out. And what happens in this process is then something of the rajas and something of the tamas carries more and more sattva. So you have more intelligent tamasic beings and more intelligent rajasic beings. And these intelligence, this infusion of intelligence, also is reflected in the subtle world. So there become both dark and light forces that come to support the evolution that's occurring within the content of matter, the creation. When one wakes up in the 15th chapter of the Gita, one sees this. For me, this is not alien. I have known of this for 10, 15 years. I've had experiences of this for years and years and years. It is not unfamiliar territory. So what I'm languaging here is just pointing to you that the reality of our existence is unknowable from the consciousness that we've been. It can only be knowable when we're partaking somewhat in the consciousness of the Supreme Being. So in this moment, it's just to allow whatever you can get to be received. When one wakes up in the 15th chapter, one sees this. One becomes capable of the highest Dharma, the Satya Dharma, the Dharma of the Supreme Being in human form. One can now be a Krishna, an incarnation. The chapter that follows this 15th chapter, the 16th chapter, reveals the titanic process where these universal divine and undivine forces, both within oneself, in others, and in the collective consciousness, are at work trying to resolve and sort out the paradoxes of the unworkability of what is emerging as a new potential in the evolutionary leap. One can experience directly this endless struggle. It goes on within your own body. I have people with me right now who are going through the same process Satas is going through, because we're all actually going through this as I do this work in the collective consciousness. It is becoming a manifesting channel and instrument of the unfolding opportunity, purpose of this time of peril. So obviously, the dark forces will show themselves during times of transition like never before, because otherwise the dark forces were there, but nobody knew they were running the show. During times of transition, the sattva has come in enough that it starts becoming a parent of the dark forces that have been at work all along, and they start showing themselves. When they start showing themselves, it means they're confident. It means they think they can get away with it. There's no longer guardrails. There's no longer bondage. They can get away with it. They can play the system. These forces have some of the intelligence of the great beings. They could be brilliant, clever, subtle, for dark, tamasic, and rajasic. I know, I met these in my human life. It was really astounding to see a human being carrying as an instrument of the beauty of these dark forces, both tamas and rajas. That's why I could recognize who is Donald Trump and who are the people around him. It is apparent once you know what you're seeing, but exposure allows you to be prepared for it. So I always knew there were dark and light forces. Somehow, maybe through all the lives I've lived, there was some orientation to them. And I recognized sometimes that I could be overtaken. I recognized myself getting overtaken and then recovering myself from that. So I know that I've traveled something of the preparatory journey to come here to be with all of you, because all of this was, when I got it, it was so apparent. It was just like, well, of course, it's always been so. I had an uncle that was an Ashura. I had a mom who was a expression of the demonic force. I had a father who was sattva. It was like, of the transcendent possibility of humankind, the ideal person. It was like I was swimming in the water. I worked for Donald Trumps. I worked for people who carried that rajasic, tamasic principle that he carries. I knew him, and I worked for them. And I'm sure it was mainly to become aware and to know their nature. So part of being immersed in my life was I got to meet their physical expressions. I got to find my relationship with them. Because, by the way, when I met these Ashuras, there was something thrilling about them. There was something compulsively attractive about them, even if it was awful, just like Donald Trump is. They kept ensnaring people into their web of lies and deceits and manipulations, all wrapped around their own self-enhancement, their own structures for securing whatever gain they decided to make. And they had this tremendous power to make things happen that nobody else could create. They had this power to manifest that was just like, wow, guy might be an asshole, but he really can get things done. He hasn't paid me, and I don't know if I'm ever going to get the money out of him, but boy, look at what he created. See, we've got a lot of juice locked up in the dark forces because we're all avoiding meeting them. We're all pretending they're not there. So therefore, our suppression becomes the force that empowers them to be more powerful in this physical dimension, into the dimension of physical, vital, and mental. So you often see them in power positions. I worked, when I was with California Youth Authority, I worked with delinquent drug addicts, and there was one family that all of its children were, all four of the boys had gone through juvenile hall and were now in California Youth Authority, so they were in lockup. And they had a father, and the father was this brilliant historian, worked at the local college. He was highly respected. Everybody just thought he was a wonderful person. And then the news story came that his 12-year-old daughter walked into his bedroom while he was sleeping, took a shotgun, and shooting him with a shotgun twice. And when she was arrested, right, she was the only one who wasn't in the system, she said, he had to die. He was evil. So she endured that family to the age of 12 to fulfill her role, to kill this one terribly powerful, manipulative and subtle, intelligent manifestation of the dark principle. And from then on, everything was revealed. The perversion and the distortion and the domination, the cruelty and the psychopathic ability to convince, enchant other people with whatever it is he spoke. Yeah, they exist. And they exist as part of the fabric of our world. Our inability to see them prevents us from doing anything about it. But once they're caught, even the system is being corrupted by these forces that doesn't allow them to get away from it. And that's why we're in this time where there's no consequences. And now the dark forces are at play. They really think they can do it this time. They can end the creation. They can end the evolutionary opportunity of this planet. They're enthused and motivated. And that's why it's so hard for human beings to ignore them anymore. It's why so many human beings are becoming distressed and disturbed. And it's also why we have the coronavirus. Because the world mothers can only work in some arenas. And one of her arenas is plagues, floods, fire, all of which is being empowered by the consequences of human indulgence and error that comes from the Rajas and Tamas. The Tamas never knows consequences. And the Rajas just wants to do. So between those two, we have what we have. This peace, this moment, this time of peril. And what is our job? To wake up, to become aware of it. Outside and inside. But first, inside. Because it's here, in the authority of knowing ourselves as a supreme being, that we can meet it. Because we can't meet it as human beings. We can't meet it as transcendent spiritual beings. We actually have to choose to embody and meet the suppressed darkness of our own system, to own it, to recognize it, to come and eat it. So that it becomes, okay, I've got this darkness and I have this light. And to discover that you feed, the light feeds on the darkness. When the darkness becomes the thing that draws you, then you can know that the light is winning. When you're able to get excited about the message of the dark forces, then you know that the light has come enough that this is your territory. Like I said, it's not for all of you. It'll be for some of you. Some of you, it'll be right now. Some of you are already with me, already conscious of this. But what is the nature of these forces? How do they work? What are their characteristics? How can you identify? That's what the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita was pointing to. The ability to recognize the manifestation outwardly. Now, where you can find where that outer manifestation is your reaction inwardly. You know, when the neo-Nazis start walking in front of your Capitol and getting seats in your parliament, what happens to your system? Well, notice the reaction. That's meeting the forces. When Donald Trump and his surrogates are able to distort the message so completely that nobody knows what to do, and they're creating this false equivalency between truth and untruth, making it the Democrats the bad guy, or even the Democrats making the Republicans the bad guy. It is this field that in which you have your reaction. You find your outrage, your injustice, your overwhelm, your helplessness, your disempowerment. This is the darkness. This is the opportunity of these times. Now, not all of you, like Satsangs, for the last 2 weeks, she stopped listening to the news. Because even though she's right next to me, she's not in the same place I am with these things, because she gets so much for women's rights, so much for, facts and truth, that this just triggers that structure within her and she gets overwhelmed. So there is only so much we can swallow. We recognize it. But the path forward is by meeting the reaction within ourselves as the problem, not that as the problem. Not to make it go away, not to go into some kind of transcendence and say, oh, it's all God, it's all equal. No, but to take a position from that place of outrage, which is the natural repulsion of the nature that is here aligned with a purpose, to the undivine principles that are obscuring the opportunity of the evolution. This is the nature of the Supreme Being when it becomes Krishna, when it becomes the Great Lord. It holds the values. It holds the rights and the wrongs that are the best that mankind has come up with as the entry point into dealing with the chaos in order to preserve the existing order. Because without that, this will reach a point of a spiraling chaos, which will then defeat the opportunity of this evolutionary period of time. So it is taking a stand. And so it is only here that this conversation becomes relevant. You cannot take a stand until you develop the capacity to meet the enemy. You cannot take a stand until you begin to discover your power to withdraw your consent or to give your consent without losing yourself as the enjoyer or the supporter. You begin to allow that part of you that can hold the paradox of the unworkability versus the lost opportunity, to hold these as simply two expressions of this matrix that we find ourselves in. No ordinary spiritual being can hold these titanic forces. Such a being has become a representative of the Supreme in a body. This gives them absolute authority over all these. But because one has a body, the debris of the eternal struggles within them, within us. It is here that the war of the Gita is fought, the Mahabharata. Okay. Now there's so much more to say. As a matter of fact, I gave Satdas a handout, which is an extraction from Sri Aurobindo books, extracts from Sri Aurobindo's book, Letters on Yoga. It is in these letters that all these secrets are revealed. It is 1,450 pages of vast material, which would be unassimilable if you weren't in the consciousness to receive it all, especially as the revelations go on in his letters, because he began to speak more and more of what I'm speaking now. And one segment, which really was kind of scattered throughout the book, was in this conversation of dark forces. So I think what I'm going to leave with that is I've asked Satdas to clean this up a little bit and send it to all of you as a resource, so that you can tap into this kind of particular body of knowledge where he organized it quite systematically, where he talks about the nature of ignorance, falsehood, powers and appearances. He talks about the asuras. He talks about the demonic in very precise terms. And so I feel it will enrich you to understand. But one part of this that was so useful, but I think I'll save until we meet next time, which has to do with the nature of this work. As when we get down to from here, we're going to go to manifestation. So we'll talk about what is it you're being recruited for? What is it that we're doing in a way that perhaps opens the space, at least for some of you, to discover that you have the opportunity to choose in collaborating or not. That's what we're doing. Okay. All right, so now time to kind of step back a bit. Maybe we can just take a minute or two and be with whatever's going on in your system. There is a reaction or repulsion or excitement or thrill. Any or all of those could exist. And be with what's there. Check into your body, be aware of your breath, so re-inhabit your body if you haven't been. What's going on in your area of your heart, your diaphragm, your belly, in your lower chakras, your second or first chakra. The rest of the physicality, your thighs, your calves, your feet, your arms, your neck, your head. Just touch bases with whatever's there. Okay, now ground yourself. connect to the umbilical of you and Mother Earth, World Mother. Okay, so now this opportunity is for you to come forward, to share whatever is there for you, whatever you're recognizing or meeting. And I invite you to stay inward, all of us who are listening, to stay inward while we're listening, to receive that in terms of whatever may be occurring in our own systems, to be the witness, the consenter, the supporter right now as this is being received. Okay.
Okay. So we'll, as usual, we'll invite a couple of the trainers to come forward before opening it up.
Did you have something to bring forward on this?
I could say it at the end.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So first up, we have Durga Ma.
Okay, good. Durga.
Hey there.
Hello.
Namaste. Hello.
Namaste.
Thank you for the powerful talk, both of you. What's there for me today is, well, this is about becoming Krishna. And so what I've been doing since you recommended a month or two ago is every day to speak, to do the world peace meditation. And so what I've been noticing is that now that I'm doing it, when I say the words tat sat, they have become very embodied. I can feel them in my body. And last night when I was walking in to meditate, there was this realization that Krishna was walking me. And so it caught my attention so much I stopped and just went, whoa, what is this I'm with right now? And I was pulled to go to the Gita, and I would, hoping for some clarification. What I was drawn to was chapter 8, verse 3:14, and then verse 3:10 in chapter 7. And that is, says, perishable entities are called matter, and the cosmic being is itself the divine intelligence. And so what I was feeling simultaneously in my body was the matter and the divine intelligence. And then it says, I am the Lord of sacrifices in this body. And then I found myself turning the page back to 3:10. And that says, through their constant link with me, those who are able to know me as the ultimate spiritual power in matter, the source of cosmic intelligence, and the Lord of all sacrifices are always in me. And so I got the matter and the divine intelligence because I was experiencing that. But I thought it was interesting that in both passages, the concept of the Lord of all sacrifices was there. So I was wondering if you could clarify perhaps what that's trying to tell me.
So first, thank you, Durga Ma, because obviously this is a revelatory moment for you in the recognition of what you're becoming. You're in the process of that. And the nature of what is it to be the Lord of sacrifices is the next step of being able to accept worship. Because what happens is all beings evolve through sacrifice. For the being who's sacrificing, they have to have an object of sacrificing. They have to have something to sacrifice for. There's not enough forms in existence that can support the highest expression of that sacrifice. We can sacrifice to a deity, to a statue, to an animal, to an idea, to a belief, and we empower those. And maybe we become that belief. We become that animal. We become that quality. But to be the Lord of sacrifice, that means that those who sacrifice their attention to you become you. The Supreme Being is the highest sacrifice to sacrifice to. When you discover yourself as the one who is receiving the sacrifices of all levels of sacrifices, not just to the Supreme Being, then you are the Supreme Being. So that's born you to what's left in you. The ability to receive the projection of what you've become from others. The human ego says, no, it's too much. I don't want that. It would require me to change in ways I don't want to change. You know, it would be all those stuff would come up. So if we're looking at what that is, that's the territory to explore for yourself. And what's in the way? It's your attachments. It's your preferences, as it is for all of us. It's the things we cling to as a way of organizing who we have been that we don't yet know that we're keeping in place or hanging on to. To become the object of love, to become the object of worship, to become the Lord of sacrifices is not like something you just earn. It's something you are. And therefore you have a responsibility to be willing to receive others sacrificing for you instead of you sacrificing for them. See, I was a good devotee. All I wanted to do was serve my teacher. It was my thrill. When I was in service to him, it was a better energy than samadhi, than transcendence. It was all I wanted to do. At some point, it went away. It just went gone. It was no longer there. And I didn't know what to do with that, but I knew it was over. I knew that devotional worship had completed itself. I had become. I didn't know that at the time. It's taken me years to be able to hold this position, but it's come because I've continued to play the part. And in the process, created the capacity to receive the worship, to be the means by which the universe could be recognized and experienced, and the channel through which their sacrifices can bring them the reward of that sacrifice by becoming what I've become. So it is for you. It's really coming out of the smallness when you've been able to expand your ability to receive love. Come to the place of recognizing that anyone who comes to devotion is that already that they're devoted to. You discover within yourself that willingness to sacrifice to that who has come to you in that consciousness of sacrifice. Therefore, the Supreme Being gives of itself to one who comes as a true devotee to sacrifice their ego, to sacrifice their preferences, to sacrifice the other options that they had. All right, so just chew on that one. Okay? Yeah, smile is a good way to take it. Because it really is very wonderful. You then discover the whole universe is looking to you all the time. And it's calling you to pay attention to you and them.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Satchamanu and Savitri.
Okay. Who goes first?
I go first. Yeah. This is a practice in restraining myself. Because, you know, in the first part of the talk, I was meeting that boy in myself that would like to hide. So that was perfect already. That was a perfect opportunity.
Very good.
And then you grabbed out the article and you started talking about the Ashuric and the demonic forces, and wow, there was so much love. There was so much love that tears came in my eyes, and I just wanted to be with you guys and hold your hand and kiss your cheeks very gently and just be in the yes and be in the delight of being born in this spirit of time, where this peril, this thing I cursed upon myself is the only thing that enables me to transfer to being the Supreme Being. nothing else would do that. And that became so clear when you spoke, when you both spoke. And so I'm so over the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you.
And I would like to, because there's one verse I take refuge in as a resource, and that's verse 676 for chapter 18. When merged with the Supreme, one becomes serene and does not mourn, nor does he desire. He accepts me with supreme devotion. After attaining that state of supreme devotion, he knows me in reality and enters into my being.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and while being merged in me, he's able to perform all ordained duties and attains the supreme state by my grace. You know, for me, that's that being the source of the stream of the Satchitananda, where the devotion and the action and the knowledge, they come together.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's funny in a way. Always when we meet like this, words fall away, and it's yeah.
To be that, and you're training your system, the little parts of you, to grow up into this greater part of you by being able to include them and not diminished by them, to embrace them, to include them in the process of the unfolding as you take all parts of yourself beyond what they imagined was ever possible.
Mm.
When we heal ourselves, we heal the world. And then the rest is just showing up. Beautiful. Thank you. Really got it.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Savitri.
Yes. So when the first, the introduction of today, and it was about dark forces, I was very sharp, because this is my chapter, or this is, and my whole body is resonating and trembling, because I finally understand so much about my human life that makes sense now, why I'm born in this time, why I have been fascinated with darkness, why I have been working for shady people, shady companies, and never been like that, but learning and seeing and
Shady
recognizing. That's what he said. And also working like in Vegas, we call it like the graveyard ships, and showing up for that. I'm finally starting to understand what my body always knew. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So I don't even need more words. It's like, I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Perfect. All right. Thank you both.
Next up, we have Siddhartha.
Namaste.
Namaste. That point where the roots from below meet the roots from below above, is that the point where the Maya is created? The veiling?
It's all Maya, but the nature of the Maya is completely convincing from that which is coming from below. Well, that's coming from above. They are the vehicles of the higher Maya, the Yoga Maya. So there is a Maya that comes from the weave of material life. And there's a Maya that comes from spirit as it descends into matching material life. And the Maya becomes most poignant at the interface of those two. That's where it's a peril, where there's enough of the higher to see the dimmer version of itself in the lower. And that's what we awaken to spiritually. So We awaken to both the Maya of the physical embodiment of our human ego and the Maya of ourselves as the perceiver and experiencer. That's preventing us from knowing more or to know the fullness of what it is we've awakened to.
The Maya of the perceiver? I don't get that.
No, well, that's the only Maya there is.
Well, no, so there is Maya in the sattva.
Absolutely.
It's not just all coming from the dark.
No, the sattva is the happiness of the attachment to happiness and knowledge. So it's the Maya that's associated with awakening. It's the Maya that's associated with becoming free from your embodiment. It's the Maya that's associating with the different stages of the journey that lays claim to that stage as if it was the last stage. It is the nature of the weave, and you can't know it like it's only down here or only up here. It's in all dimensions until you go beyond the Great Lord. Even the Great Lord is being influenced by the higher vibrations of Maya. Only the Supreme Being stands beyond that, holds the space between the absolute non-existence and the first point of existence. So yeah, it's all Maya. That's what those verses say. So that even now, in your ability to perceive what's going on and to experience, the part of you that right now is trying to understand it, which is a useful part, is weakened by the attachment to knowledge that you've already learned, that you're now trying to discover where it's not fitting or where it is fitting, where it's matching. So that perceiver, you are right at this moment, an expression of that piece of Maya that you are in entering into this exploration, this discovery. Because it's only within Maya that there's exploration and discovery. It's only in separation that any bliss or joy or love or realization occurs. This is what we're speaking of. It's not like Maya bad, Maya good, or in that principle. It is simply the nature of embodiment has to draw from a different essential quality than anything that would want to know or anything that would experience. A very core, unchanging, fundamental principle that holds the opportunity of itself being embodied as you, this life right here, right now, in the circumstances you're finding yourself. See, right now, Siddhartha, this is an imperishable moment. To recognize right now, this moment, where there is everything, which includes all Maya and all truth. It includes the potential of all of those, each expressing itself in your system to various extents. When we choose to enter, oh my God, it's all Maya. There's no up or down. It's all Maya. Then how to be? What do I hold? What do I make important? How do I live? What is my role? What is the purpose? Opens up a next depth of the questioning, a next willingness of the exploration. And this is what gives you the capacity to meet the vulnerability that's coming up, to meet the confusion and the uncertainty that's coming up, so that you can come out of the adaptation that has allowed you to operate in the world as successfully as you have. So we go through these periods of transmutation, of transformation. And it's what keeps us in that process is an essential quality that we talked about yesterday: faith, sensing its purpose, willingness to let go, to sacrifice, to surrender, to the not knowing, and yet still take the actions, still do the things that serve the unfolding that has brought you to this moment. This is all capacity building. That's what we're talking about.
Well, like the sattvic happiness, that would appear to be a Maya that we create versus the Maya of the asat, the inconscient, where it's just completely been absorbed.
And so it would seem.
So it would
So it would seem.
touche.
Okay, very good.
So I'd love in this last little bit of time we have to take a few participants. I see your hand, Yannicka, but I do want to get some other voices in.
So next is Hugh and Nella.
Hugh and Nella. Hey, it looks like Hugh's the biggest one. All right, now, welcome.
In 2017, there was an event in my life that I took place where I just gave myself. And I could see now, based on what was revealed today, I could talk about, I met the sad one, the sad and the asad. I was the light and the darkness. I was the dishonest. I was the disillusion. I gave myself to experience my vital in a way that I couldn't explain it, but I said, I need to experience this. I risk everything in my life, everything. And I felt the diminishment, the judgment. And I just said, I need to experience this. And I didn't know until today when I heard Sadas and I heard you, Shree, that the only way I survived that experience, because I'm a person of experiencing, that through your talk today, my awareness came back. And now I realize the Supreme has been with me all my life. It's the Supreme who made me survive, who made me be here right now as I am. I'm experiencing that inclusion of the darkness. I'm experiencing that inclusion of light of everything in me.
I knew there was something about you I liked. It is a celebration, my dear. I'm so happy you have found this warrioress, the source of your warrioress. Yes. I am so delighted to see this coming together in you.
My heart, my stomach, when Sadas was talking, it was just in fire. And now my heart is just expanded on the inclusion of everything, everything, everything.
Wow, I'm feeling that.
And I know my body can hold it, can witness it, can contain, can enjoy it, and can rejoice, and everything. So I just want to say, for the ball,
Tears are coming. Tears are coming to my eyes in celebration to what you're just demonstrating. It is just like, that's the power of this little lady over there somewhere in Australia. Wow. All right, there you are. All right, those are your marching orders. You've just blown the conch, my dear. Woo. All right.
So next up is Susanna.
Yeah, I know you gotta like this one. I know you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if like is the right word, but
You haven't yet become the enjoyer, huh?
What I want to bring forward is actually something I experienced during the 6th day this summer. But because you started talking about the Gunas, I feel like a little bit of self-doubt was taken away. And anyway, I just have to share. And that is that during one of the meditations in the 6th day, I had this experience of meeting the Gunas, in a sense that they were actual entities or beings. So, and we sort of sat down and had a conversation. And why it was so powerful for me, and I guess that's why I'm sharing. And I'm curious to see if there's any validity in it, but it has helped me. What I understood from them is that, like, they're as suppressed and distorted as the Divine Mother, or, you know, whatever is going on, that they're just as much in pain and in grief. That, you know, the tamas, which in its purity is incubation and restoration, is being held down by this ignorance. And then the rajas, which is just this beautiful creation and force, is being overtaken by greed and selfishness, and even the sattva, which is like the wisdom, it's overtaken by this spiritual bypassing and transcendence. So I could just
You met it. That's it. You got it.
and why it was so powerful is it made me shift from resistance and repulsion towards compassion and love, and yeah, this understanding of they're in this battle too. And it sort of gave me some distance and clarity when I can now sense them in myself.
Perfect. That's the
Yeah.
consciousness. The consciousness that revelation came to is with you now, as the part of your consciousness is locked up in those structures within your own system. So as you include those as principles from the higher consciousness, your job is to include those principles where you're still vested, where they're still feeling the angry suppression, where it's still stuck in the structure of not being buried and suppressed. So that gives you a greater capacity to be with that struggle of the collective that's occurring in you as an individual. Because that is the work of one who has become universal. And we come universal, it's all with us, the dark and the light, when we take a body. So the body has these structures already waiting for us so that it can be worked out through the course of our lived life. So you're working this out. It's so hard to do this if you don't have a beacon, if you don't have a way of holding or understanding from your higher consciousness what's going on. That's why your quest for knowledge has been so ferocious. It has been because you can't manifest until you've come to what you've recognized at the last 6th day. Because now you can really enter into the parts of you that sold itself out to the dark, that made a deal with those parts. And there you're partaking as an individual with the condition of that they're carrying as the collective diminishment of consciousness and its expression. All right, so it's perfect. It was the right affirmation. It's the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna.
Next up is Ma Shakti.
Ma Shakti. No, baby. Up, sound. We don't see anything on our end. I don't know if you can hear. You can hear, but you can't. We can't hear you.
Yeah, maybe the headphone.
Huh?
There you go. We can hear you
Okay.
now.
Guess my headphones are not working.
Yeah.
Anyway. Oof. Okay. When you were talking about verse 5:11 and the witness, the consenter, the supporter, and the enjoyer, I was reminded of something that's a structure in me that woke me up at 3:00 this morning also. And and it's been there all my life, but it's been shifting and evolving. And it's what I always called the free floating anxiety. Like I would wake up, and back in my past, it was always like all these thoughts, and they caused this anxiety in me, which was a sensation in my belly and in my diaphragm. And over time, I've seen how it's really not the thoughts that are causing the sensation, but it is the sensation that comes first. And then I look for things to confirm that sensation as this anxiety. And so as I become aware of that, I've distanced myself and I can just see it. I can feel it. I wake up, I feel it, and I watch it. Is that enjoying it? Is my question.
Not quite yet,
Not
but it's
quite
in the
yet.
vicinity. It's getting there. The enjoyment will be the recognition and the revelation that comes when you're moving into a deeper relationship within your body. But you're using your strong awareness now to be present and to choose to be with it. It's the experience of it when it goes into your body is both the stress of the anxiety and the serenity and the peace and the bliss simultaneous.
Well, there is a bliss component to this, just in the fact, well, maybe it's just the knowledge
That's still
that
bliss.
makes me very satisfied that it's like, it's just a sensation. It's not
Anything
it's
else?
like, it's not reality. It's not really these thoughts.
What the mind would make of it. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So it's so important, Ma Shakti, that you're at the place where you're questioning the knower, because the knower itself is addicted to knowing. Even if it's spiritually awake, it wants to know more about, more to awake to. So it has a curiosity, but it is still an expression of Maya. When you're in the body, without the knower, but in the experiencer, the integration happens more quickly. Take the knower out of the formula, and you're just in the immediacy of the sensation in your body. The assimilation of the difference converts into witnessing, consenting, supporting, into enjoying. But it is a deepening of being with it. And when it's turning into that kind of peace that comes, or satisfaction, as you described, that's the beginning of the enjoyment.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Next is Renee and Tanya.
Okay. Renee, namaste.
Namaste.
Have we met before?
Yes, we met on the Barcelona group.
Okay. All right. Very good.
So in the Barcelona group, you encouraged me to study the latter half of the Gita. And you said it would be very helpful for me. And so I want to thank you for teaching it.
Yeah.
And I had some awareness, experiences of non-duality that were non-spiritual and just very sort of matter of fact.
Very good.
And, so today when I was reading the 10th chapter and the yoga of discrimination, and bringing that, layering that on top of my experiences was this spark and this recognition that wasn't there before. And it made everything more whole.
Very good.
And then when you talked tonight about the dark aspect and the interaction between the tamas and the rajas with the sattva, it made so much sense to me, and it was almost like this permission to not try to purify a part of myself that I've been spending so many years in pujas and bhakti and putting my head to feet to try to purify these things and not look at them and push them away and deny them. And in your talking, I just became like completely electric, realizing the truth of what you're saying and understanding it here and just saying, like, it makes more sense. I can't push these things away. I must include them.
There you go. You got your marching orders. When you got down to just ordinary, that's where it is they become serene and they perfectly fulfill their duties in life. And if your duty in life is your purpose, and your purpose is the first to know yourself as the Supreme Being, and then to manifest that. So you're getting it very quickly. It's still in your awareness, still has to yet be fully embodied, but this is a powerful showing for you of the capacity that you're carried that I must have recognized before when I told you. Read those chapters, write those chapters. So you're here, you're getting introduced to the next aspect of your journey now, where you come out of the being the devotee to being the devoted.
Thank you. Namaste.
I just want to check in with you because we've gone 10 minutes over.
I'd like you to do a conclusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry to a few of you who won't get to come forward today. I'm a lousy timekeeper because I have a real conflict of interest. For me, hearing Shree speak today was utterly moving. My eyes were burning with the birth of tears, much of his talk. It was a thrilling experience for me. To know that somehow, by some series of grace, far beyond the understanding and knowledge of any of us, we've all been present as the mysteries and the structure, not just of this universe, but of all of creation are being revealed. It's just chapter by chapter and piece by piece. If you just reflect on what he's taken us through today. These are the mysteries of mysteries. I have that image of that famous woodcut where the man puts his head through the sky, through the universe, and everything is revealed, through the veil, I mean. That's what's taking place here today. And I would invite each of us, the same way last time that Satyapriya shared her insight about how everything in existence is in devotion. I would really invite you, the way Shree invited Durga, to receive the depth of grace and the blessing that's taking place here. And that there is no mistake, there's no accident, that you, among only 70 people, are hearing what all of us have lived almost an uncountable number of lives to receive. So as Shree was talking, that just hit me so hard. And I had this feeling of beings packing in the space above our heads and packing in the space around us and packing in the space behind us. The same way in the Mahabharata, when something truly spectacular takes place, the celestials and the rishis descend so that they can partake in it too. That's how it felt to me. It felt that beings on all planes and levels were drawn here today to receive that most precious of wisdom. I was reminded too, as Shree spoke, how whether it was at 4 a.m. or whatever, when I had got myself seated in meditation, and I was wrestling with that negativity in my system, there came a moment when I just said to myself, you know, this is what you asked for. This is what you want. This is why you're here. And that reminder brought me back to that inner alignment, that these forces, this content, this darkness that each of us carries and experiences in our own unique ways, is itself the dawning of the grace we've prayed for all of our lives. And the more we can hold that context and that perspective, the more we can actually fulfill the longing our soul has carried from life to life to life. And I know for me too, when Shree spoke of that 12-year-old girl who shot her father in the head with a shotgun not once but twice, I had my own match to that. And I flashed to an experience when I was 17 and I was helping my father in the yard. And I was holding a sledgehammer and we were driving stakes into the ground, tall stakes, because we lived in New England where there's a lot of snow. And so these were to guide a snowplow. And there was this moment when this tyrant, this all-powerful being in my life, he bent down to hold the stake for me. And it just flashed for me, now is the moment. And it was to take that sledgehammer and to crush it into his temple again and again until he collapsed. And there was something in me, in my purpose, that knew not to do that, that knew to hold the impulse and not to take the premature freedom. That wouldn't have been freedom at all. And he was such a titanic force in my life. You know, he used to have these small handguns that he kept in our basement with boxes of ammunition there. And I would fantasize in the last years of his life, when I was 17, 18, and 19, of loading one of those guns and taping it under my chair at dinner. And when I was receiving the full force of the brunt of his domination, of having a mirror under there that I would hold up to him to reflect his monstrosity back to him before I shot him 6 times. And the thing was, I was so frightened of him, I didn't think those 6 bullets would necessarily do the trick. He didn't have a shotgun, thank God. But so having that flash before me in this conversation of darkness here today, and to know that it's by the mystery and by the grace of my experiencing that form of suffering and submission, that is in fact the price I paid to be here. That is the token. And it was an absolutely, completely, irrevocably worthy price to pay to be here. And I would pay it again, and I would pay much more than that to be here receiving the wisdom and grace Shree is so generously giving all of us. And he's giving it because we in fact are that. And it's for us to get that. It's for us to receive it in the same way that the Lord of Sacrifices receives all sacrifices, because that is what is asked for of us. That is what is needed, and that is what is required. Thank you.
You should know, Sat does, that there is a celebration going in the forces below us as well. It's like they're rising up to this revelation, like being fascinated with what is happening. They're coming up because they too long for light. They too long to come into existence. I'm feeling them from the bottom of my body coming up to try to come into existence through this moment. It's bliss. It's ananda. It's this huge emerging out of the asat that's trying to happen. All right, so we stirred the pot, top and bottom. It should be an interesting few days until we meet again on Tuesday for our final meeting. So study the material, meet with each other, explore what was there for you to share with each other for from today, and let's further the opportunity that's been created here. All right, so well now, thank you, Satats,
Thank you so much.
for this, and we will now just sit for a few minutes. I know we're quite a bit over, but let's make it 5 minutes. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat Shri. All glory to Supreme Being. May truth manifest. Namaste.